Okay.
All right. Good morning, Doug. We have a bunch of questions from viewers. I'm going to get through as many of them as I can. Before, though, I'd like to follow up on just some conversation we were having right before this about ambition. We know some people who are incredibly ambitious. People you've known for decades, so mutual friends of ours. What do you think it is? We're talking about a big deal that someone was pursuing and it failed, but it was an incredibly large deal. And you're like, well, I wouldn't even be interested in it. And I just wonder, what is it that makes people ambitious like that? Like, where does ambition come from, and what are the limits of ambition? What should they be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it boils down to the meaning of life, if any. And the people we were talking about are both unbelievably ambitious, but also really, really successful. We're talking billionaire level or above, actually. So why do these guys keep doing this? I mean, personally, I'd have no interest in it. It's just more scattered parts that perhaps they're trying to give some kind of an artificial meaning to life. But look, a very intelligent attitude towards this thing, putting a limit on your ambition. There's a Chinese geologist that I know who's also very successful in the mining business in China. And we were talking one time a few years ago about exactly this. And he said, well, this was how long ago? Well, this was 10 years ago. And he said, $30 million to me is all I want or all I can imagine needing, because I don't want to conquer other countries or build gigantic palaces. But at $30 million, I can own any car I want. I can fly anywhere I want. I can have absolutely the best of life. And why should I strive for more than that? The rest of it becomes superfluous and a management problem, because you've got so much money that now you're occupied not enjoying yourself or improving yourself, but managing your damn money. And that's so true. And it's odd because he said that because I came to the conclusion some years before that that seemed like a right amount of money. It depends on interest rates, of course. And it's things are always changing with the value of the dollar. But I thought, well, if you can live on the interest in a nice manner where you have everything you want, then you certainly have no financial worries. Of course, that's all changed today because you don't really own anything anymore, frankly. Your bank account can vanish, as people in Cyprus found, and people in other countries are going to find in the near future. Your commodity account can vanish, which happened with, ML, the thing Corzine was running. That was a shock. Your stock account can vanish, not just if the stocks all melt down, but if the brokerage firm goes bust and it's all just computer entries. You don't have anything there. You have gold, it can be stolen. So you got to keep this in context.
Also, excessive taxation. The wealth tax that will almost inevitably be rolled out. There's also, you have inflation also that's driving down substantially the value of that, and there's no yield anywhere, so there's no income to be lived off of. So, yeah, different set of problems today.
And that's not even mentioning that you might become an enemy of the state.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, it's definitely so. It's but then that in a way, this is an argument. This is an argument for the Atlas Shrugged approach in my mind, which is that you're participating in a fraudulent game. So, and you're holding it up through your contributions of value creation, and yet there's no security of your own wealth or your own person or any of these things. So in that environment, it seems like the desire to be ambitious to the extent that these guys were, we talked about, to build something really, truly remarkable, and they both certainly have. Seems like the incentives have certainly changed over time.
I know. And there may not actually be an answer to these questions. There may not actually be an answer.
Yeah, I do think that, but there is something that drives those people who are just so ambitious like that. And I don't know what it is, but it's hard not, even when sometimes you might not like a specific conduct of those super ambitious people, you wouldn't have done the same. There is something super impressive and admirable about it, though. I mean,
It's
really.
true. It's true. But, I'm a believer in Aristotle's golden mean that, on the one, let's see, he gave so many examples of this. It's like cowardice is way to one end, and rashness is way to the other, but courage is in the middle. And this is true of almost everything. We could have to think of the examples right now, not off the top of my head, but or for instance, being a thug that knows nothing on one side, or somebody who's got thick glasses and spends his whole day doing nothing in the library but is a physical skeleton, intellectual, physical, the golden mean. And the same is true with ambition and money. That's the way I see it. So a lot of these guys that are really, really rich are suffering from a psychological aberration, it seems to me.
Makes sense. All right. Well, let's get some of these questions. The inflation deflation argument, we've talked about that before, we know you come down on the side of seeing inflation because of all the money printing, but they were asking if you could try and steel man the deflation argument. Like if you were to make the best case for deflation, what is that case?
Yeah, and you can make a good case for deflation. Actually, my friend Robert Prechter, we've been friends for like 40 years, and we talk about this every year in New Orleans, among other things. And basically, the argument for deflation is this: it's that there's all this debt in the world. The way our system is structured, the way inflation occurs, is through debt. Monetizing debt. That's really the way we do it. So the question occurs, well, if some people can't pay that debt, then other people aren't going to be able to pay their debt. Bond defaults. Where's the $1 billion in the bond go? It dies, goes to money heaven. It disappears. Stock market crashes because a company goes bankrupt because it's got so much debt. Where's all the value that stock represented? That's a deflation. And overnight, there can be so many less dollars in existence because of defaults like that the remaining dollars, which are still a medium of exchange, become worth much more. Okay, that's the deflation argument, but the government is still active out there, so it's going to redouble its efforts to reinflate. So it could be either in the short run or both at once in different parts of the economy, but that's how a deflation occurs. It's because of debt, essentially defaulting.
Got it. And because the fractional reserve banking system, somewhat like, there's few, $100 deposited creates, 90 new dollars in the world, right? That they loan out. So if essentially, just like leverage can work to your advantage, leverage in the money system can work to huge disadvantages. One thing defaults, that destroys the $90 that were, new dollars that were created. And then that can cascade into that original 100 that was deposited, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why all the banks in the world are basically bankrupt. I mean, they get defaults on a small percentage of their loans, their capital's gone, and they're bankrupt. So yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Doug, do you know any civilizations that did not use any form of money but were successful?
Well, we have to define success. We have to define civilization, I guess, to answer that question. But civilization actually started about 5,000 years ago in ancient Sumeria in Mesopotamia. And they used money. It wasn't minted by the state. I mean, the first state government issued money, currency, was in Lydia in the 6th century BC. and it was King Croesus. That's where we get this expression, richest Croesus. So I guess the answer to the question is successful. Yeah. Well, you can't have a civilization without money because there were no civilizations before 3000 BC, at least as far as we know. That's when the first cities occurred. There are smaller things but the first civilization about then in Mesopotamia. And they had means of exchange, not currency per se, but currency per se only originated about 500, 600 BC. So the answer to the question is no. No, you can't have a civilization without money. It's not, I don't think it's possible, quite frankly, for all kinds of reasons.
I think people imagine that money is a problem. People say money being the root of all evil or whatever, the money is the problem, but it's probably a better reflection of the fact that our current money system is essentially fraudulent, right?
Yeah, it is fraudulent. And not to be pedantic, but they say that money is the root of all evil, but the Bible, and I'm not a fan of the Bible, it's the love of money is the root of all evil. And I think that was St. Paul. I mean, I think I'm correct. I think it was St. Paul that said that. And almost nothing that St. Paul said had anything to do with Jesus Christ, as far as I can tell. They're like two totally different strains which have been melded together. Very interesting. But anyway, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Someone says, I heard through the grapevine that Doug has historically enjoyed trading options, specifically selling puts. If this is the case, it'd be nice to hear more or less his strategy in doing so. And is it exclusive to mining companies or is your scope broadened beyond that?
Well, look, options can be dynamite, and there are a lot of one of the reasons why I'm so bearish on the overall markets is because there are millions of average guys who've never done anything with options, who just discovered they exist, still have a hard time figuring out how a put's different from a call, and they're spending a lot of money for expensive trading services to tell them to buy and sell these things on. It's all crazy. So actually, yes, I've been active in the options market for many, many years. And here's the way I see it. You should never buy options because they're a wasting asset. You hold them long enough, they are guaranteed to go to zero, everything else being equal. So generally, I prefer to act as the casino as opposed to the gambler and sell them as opposed to buy them. And that way, time is on my side. So when I sell options, whether it's puts or calls, but generally, I prefer selling puts for a number of reasons. I sell the nearby, slightly out of the money ones and hope they go to zero. I don't buy these things because, look, when you're buying options, you have to be right in order to win, but not just right. You have to be very right because it's not only got to go up, but it's got to go up enough to
Make it count. Yeah.
Overcome the premium.
Yep.
So I hope the questioner is not paying a lot of money for guesswork on the part of somebody peddling an expensive newsletter.
Let's hope not. And you mentioned there's a lot of people that are participating in options that never did before. And we have talked about this on this show before, but it's worth mentioning. My girlfriend, who had no stock experience, nothing, never. Well, she went through and she was setting up a Robinhood account in the car in the passenger seat beside me. And it asks her specifically, how many years experience trading bonds, trading stocks, trading options, and all of them. She's like, none, zero with all of it. And once her account is set up, the next page said, you should add options, or would you like to add options? Would you like to leverage yourself up essentially for the options? But they put it in a very good marketing way. So it seemed like, yeah, this is the smart thing to do. They even had like animated confetti falling once your account was created and saying, now you should do options. This is the next obvious step. And so these services the brokerages before would never even allow you to trade options unless you had some experience and they had reviewed your account and all that. But now it's an upsell when it's almost automated. So that's a little
Well,
scary.
and here's the interesting thing about this, kind of a tip off. I'm sure they weren't inviting her to write options or sell options. It would only be buying. So it's the smart money, the big money that's on the other side of that transaction. I mean, the little people just buy them. They don't have the capital to sell them. It takes capital to start with, to sell them.
Scary. Okay, let's see. Gold and silver prices. With many of the miners full of cash on hand, why don't they negotiate higher prices versus the futures? To me, it makes sense that I need a future contract on my mine production if I need the cash to pay for payroll and costs. Many of the CEOs will speak about coming higher prices, yet they seem to accept lower prices. Perhaps I've missed the big boat, but participating in this segment for only 5 years or so, it seems to be a bad relationship with the system.
I'm not sure. That's that's a little bit of an unclear question. When I look, my answer to that question would be, mining companies can use the futures market to sell their product a couple of years out in the future, but it doesn't make much sense really today unless they're very bearish on gold, silver, platinum, whatever it is, because interest rates are so low. So you're not going to get much for doing that. And look, my best answer to that question is that I ask myself why mining companies immediately sell all of their product instead of keeping it in inventory. If they're bullish on its prospects, there's only one mining company that I know. It's Almaden, run by the Polican family, who are old friends of mine. And when they are running a surplus, they don't sell the gold. They keep their gold in inventory, keep the capital that way. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I don't think you have to pay taxes on it until you sell it. So you're putting off the taxes as well. And if you believe you're in a gold bull market, that's a smart thing to do. But, gee, I don't know. I mean, all these big companies are run by corporate suits, quite frankly. So I don't know how they think.
Okay, next question is, which anti-utopia, or dystopia, I guess you'd say, is more likely to come to the US? Hunger Games, Running Man, The Mandibles, or Brave New World?
Or Atlas Shrugged, or there's about a dozen others.
Yep.
Yeah. Gee, I don't know. We're getting elements of all of them. But it's coming. And the very fact that a lot of people, I don't know if it was the majority or not, elected the Biden-Harris team tells me that most people are looking forward to whatever's being done to them. So I've got no sympathy for the average American chimpanzee.
Yes, it does seem like I've been arguing against people getting what they seem to want. I mean, they really want it, they really deserve it, maybe they should have it.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, everybody in the end, I think, gets what they deserve. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, you get what you deserve.
All right, good. Let's see. What are Doug's thoughts on society trending towards authoritarianism and welfarism as a result of the family dynamic in the home growing up?
Oh, that's a very good question, because you might wonder, why are people so basically sympathetic towards socialism? And the answer, I think, is that families are naturally socialistic, communistic even, from each according to his ability and to each according to his needs. And that's the way parents treat children. And, it seems like kind of a sweet deal. So we grow up in a little socialist dictatorship with the, father playing Chairman Mao or whoever it is. So yeah, it's like we're programmed, for the first quarter of our lives to believe in socialism, because that's what the family is. But the family it's different from the state. It's a bad analogy, but it's one that everybody makes. Pity.
Okay, Doug, what are your thoughts on Estancia de Cafayate? Is it still a good option for Americans looking to diversify real estate abroad?
Well, that's a good question because Estancia is an artistic and aesthetic success. It's got a world-class gym. It's got horses. It's got golf. It's got polo. It's got a great little town of 10,000 people with lots of restaurants that are nice. And, the people there, it's great. So the only problem with Estancia is Argentina. You've got some clinically insane people that are running the government there. They're like the Argentine version of Harris and Biden. The two Fernandezes. One of them is an ex-Kirchner. So it's a problem. It's very nice. Everybody tells me that's there now. It's very nice, very pleasant place to ride out the COVID hysteria. But on the other hand, you're in Argentina, which presents its own set of challenges. But if you're just in Estancia, yeah, it's cool. It's nice. You got to be somewhere.
Got to be somewhere. Great weather, nice property, lots of, and you do feel really far away from everything else in the world. At least when I was there, you did.
You do. And right now, the costs are extremely low. I mean, it's you go to a restaurant, it's like free.
All right, let's see. Doug, how do you feel about the future of Eastern Europe and what role do you think it'll play in the next decade?
The trend in Eastern Europe is good. I mean, communism collapsed recently enough that a lot of people remember, well, that was kind of a bad idea. On the one hand, so that's a plus. The trend is right. They still remember the bad old times, number one. And number two, I think that the invasion of Europe by Africans and Middle Easterners and the takeover of Europe by the Chinese, all three of these things are going to happen at once. That's going to evidence itself, I think, mainly in Western Europe, but not so much in Eastern Europe, which is to say the Baltics, Russia, Ukraine, Poland. So I'm optimistic about them.
Okay. At what point exactly do you think that China will overtake the US in terms of military, political, and economic power?
Well, military, all of the current military technology from, F-35 fighters to, the $15 billion aircraft carriers. I'm talking the boat itself, not the things you need to kit it out. That's all junk. It's really junk. It's about as good as battleships before World War II, or cavalry regiments before World War I. So, I don't know who's ahead in biological war and crypto war. Those are the two main things I think are going to be what World War III is about. But the Chinese are parity, maybe ahead, probably ahead. And everything else. Now, this is going to be the Chinese century because the US and the West it's not just that they're declining and doing the wrong things, they're doing exactly the opposite of the right things. So all the Chinese have to do is just not screw up too bad,
Right.
And if I was a Martian coming to Earth, setting up a business, I would be tempted to go to China to set up a business more than I would to the US at this point, quite frankly.
I agree. Yeah, I saw something actually. I don't know if you noticed this in the probably or saw any headlines about this, but apparently in the Defense Authorization Act, which was vetoed by Trump, but then of course the Republican and Democrats come together, coalesce to overturn that veto before Trump left. There was a provision in there which forces a national registry of all beneficial owners of corporations. including LLCs and partnerships. And, that total transparency, I guess, of any beneficial owner of any, legal structure that provided some protections in the past. I was just thinking, as an entrepreneur, it was extremely unappealing to me. Like, I don't want to be in any central database of it sets it up, I think, for this wealth tax regime, actually. Exactly who owns what. So when you can seize wealth that way. But yeah, just the incentives and the consequences of starting a business here are not nearly as favorable as they were not too long ago. So
Nope.
So someone asked about life in Uruguay. Some refer to it as the Switzerland of South America, but Doug refers to it as a backwards little communist country, I think. Can he elaborate more on his experiences in the country?
Well, look, they used to say it was the Switzerland of South America because it used to have bank secrecy, okay? And also, like Switzerland, it's stable and it's small, 3.5 million people. And it's a farming country, and that's good because, farmers tend to have, kind of sound basic values. But this has all changed. I mean, it's always been, it was one of the first socialist countries in the world. The first socialist countries in the world actually were Sweden, New Zealand, and Uruguay, all about the same time, about the turn of the 20th century. So, it's always had the wrong economic genes from that point of view, but it did have bank secrecy. It's destroyed several currencies along the way. Not as bad as Argentina and Brazil, its two neighbors have, but it's not good from that point of view. Well, it's a quiet, peaceable little country. Forget about the banks. In fact, you can forget about the tourist industry. I mean, this is a country where the limit for drunk driving is 0.00. I mean, nothing. There's no leeway on that, and they set up roadblocks. So this is really smart for a place that one of its major industries during the summer is tourism.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. How can you go to a party without having a drink? So Uruguay's in decline. And give you another example of how backward this place is. About 6 years ago, they had a plebiscite, not just a vote of the Congress, but a plebiscite among the people voting in a national income tax. So now this place is actually pretty hopeless, but it is quiet, and it's okay, and it's still international here around Punta. It's very sophisticated. There are a lot of foreigners, but no, this place is not like a perfect haven.
Got it. Okay, let's see. Next question. Doug teaches us to get second citizenship. I understand that as a way to get more operational freedom. For a poll, is it worth it pursuing a UK citizenship? Polish guy.
Yeah, a British passport is an excellent passport, defined as where can you go? The most countries you can go visa free. I mean, that's why you don't want an Afghan passport. What good is it? You got to get a visa to go anywhere, and they probably won't give you one. So sure, that's great. I'd get a British passport if you can. Absolutely, do it.
Great.
No disadvantages.
So someone says, not a question, but I'd love to see you guys get Rick Rule on the show. I've always enjoyed listening to him talk about the markets. He's straightforward with no BS.
Good idea. I think we ought to invite Rick.
I will put him on the list. Okay. Let's see. Do you think using an offshore company is still a good idea for an investment vehicle? Kind of a kind of company holding all the assets like stocks, ETFs, and metals. With all the controlled foreign corporation rules, we can probably forget about saving money on taxes. Are there other advantages to having an offshore company versus onshore?
Yeah, you're right about that. There are the tax harmonization policies of all the OECD countries. I mean, look, if you have an offshore company, You've got the formation costs, a couple $1,000. You've got the annual maintenance cost with the government, depends, $1,000. You got to pay foreign directors. That's more money. So it's costly having a foreign corporation. And what's the advantage? Well, it'll shelter you from lawsuits, but it's costly doing that. And maybe in some countries, if you have a corporation in that country, you get around some of the disadvantages, if there are any, of being a foreign citizen when you own an asset. Okay, that might be worth the carrying costs, but it's a nuisance. And one thing people don't think about is that you've got to trust your lawyers, because I remember John Templeton told the story of how he bought some land in Costa Rica one time, and he used a Costa Rican corporation to do it. And the lawyer who set it up, who incidentally later became the vice president of the country, and how was I to know? We had him speak at a conference we had in Costa Rica years ago. The guy stole Templeton's corporation. And if you can pull the wool over Templeton, I mean, so there are risks, there are dangers.
There are. Yes, I know some lesser but similar stories of people who have been in that same position. Let's see. Next question. Also, just the rules are constantly changing around the way you have to report those to the U.S. government also. And so there's lots of seems like landmines that you can get caught in by administratively failing to comply with the constantly evolving rules around foreign ownership of assets. So it's expensive, and the benefits of it are questionable at this point, in my mind at least. Let's see. Next question is, which countries have the friendliest environment for professional geologists and geophysicists, and what natural resource do you expect to boom in the coming decades?
I wouldn't think in terms of the country. I would think in terms of the company you're going to be working with and your colleagues there. Because things are always changing country by country, and it's unlikely you'll stay in one country if you're a professional geo of some type. So I don't think so much in terms of country. And as far as which elements, I think we're in a commodity bull market for some time. So I'm kind of bullish on all the metals right now. No particular favorites.
Okay. So next question about storing physical gold. How would you store physical gold, assuming that it's assuming it a long horizon and it is possible to change in the meantime place of living? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess. Where do you go with your gold?
Family, well, do you put it in a family backyard, in a bank vault, in a Switzerland duty-free zone, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a real problem. If you've got a few gold coins, well, that's not much of a problem. But if you've got a lot of gold coins, like $1 million worth, or even a few $100,000 worth, gee, now where do you put them? And silver coins, forget about it. You're talking about, a pretty massive hunk of metal. This is one of the cosmic problems of life. Uncle Scrooge put it all in his money bin. And even with Uncle Scrooge, the Beagle Boys were always trying to steal it from him. So, and frankly, in today's world, trustworthy third parties are becoming more and more of a problem, because even if they're trustworthy, the government knows that they're there, and the local government might decide to treat them as their asset, not your asset. I mean, anything's possible. It's a real problem.
But I have a friend who is internationally diversified and has literally a ton of gold in a European vault, but never expect, but they realized through this COVID stuff that their access to it, is severely limited. So, well, they planned, and what seems like the most thoughtful thing that they could do to be most safe in the storage of this, they found themselves in a position saying, well, if we need it, in this country, it might not be possible for us to even get it there at this point. I mean, it's, of course, there are services where you can move it, but just a particular circumstance made it difficult. So even being really thoughtful, you can finding yourself in a bind with it.
Yeah, yeah. This is just one of the cosmic problems of life, quite frankly. If you don't have money, you have a problem. If you do have money, it's a problem.
It's so true. So true. Although having had both sides of that problem, I can tell you that having money is a better problem than having no money.
That's right. Mae West. I've been rich, I've been poor. Rich is better.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Doug, what are your thoughts on Brazil? One of our viewers is visiting there next month. Just curious your thoughts on it. You talked about it a little bit.
Look, I like Brazil, but to start with, Brazil is at least two, really more like three or more different countries. If I was going to move to Brazil, I would choose the far south of Sao Paulo. It's very European. It's very civilized, very advanced. But that's the bright side. The not so bright side is that Brazil probably has the worst bureaucracy in the world. I mean, I can't speak authoritatively on that, but I know what Argentina's bureaucracy is like, and the bureaucracy in some of these other South American countries. And Brazil is notorious for having the worst bureaucracy of all these countries. And as far as maintaining the value of their currency, since the 1930s, they've been in a dead heat with Argentina for who can destroy the most currencies more quickly. So there's no stability there. It's sociologically unstable. Like I said, it's really at least three different countries, probably more. So yeah, I like Brazil. It's great, but
well, hopefully, if when this viewer goes to Brazil, love to have them report back to us like what their experience is, because some boots on the ground intel would be useful.
that'd be great. Yeah, love to hear from them.
Right. Okay, so just trying to get through some of these, make sure get to the meaty ones here at least. So who is, in Doug's opinion, who is the Socrates and Plato and Aristotle of our time?
Okay, so who are Socrates and Plato and Aristotle? Okay, so Socrates is a wise man who used to hang around on street corners talking to people, and he said a lot of wise, logical things, and Plato wrote them down, and he started the academy. Interesting, but most of Plato's philosophical ideas, I think, are askew. I mean, he was the original statist with his ideal society. Aristotle, I like a lot more, but okay, these are all wise men that thought and said things were worthwhile. So who do we have today? Are we talking about an intellectual that just knows lots of things about lots of subjects? That would be Aristotle. Or do we want to limit ourselves to people that have, sound philosophical thoughts? Not too many of them around. My best, I would say, maybe Murray Rothbard is the most recent example. He didn't cover all the bases. He wasn't, Rothbard didn't know much about the sciences, but he knew a lot about economics and history. I don't know, that's a good question. Who do you think?
I honestly, I have no idea, because while I know what those guys, I know some of their philosophies, what I don't know is I don't know the actual influence that they had on their contemporaries at the time. You know what I mean? So I don't really know how influential they really were within the culture then, because we might have, maybe there is somebody that will emerge as a Aristotle-like figure, but might not be known to us in this moment, or maybe the same is true of Socrates. I don't know. I just don't know. You have a more of a historical understanding of their contemporaries and the influence they probably had on their contemporaries than I do.
Yeah, well, I've just started reading a book that seems like a pretty good book. I'm not sure exactly where the author, whose name is Peter Burke, is going to go. It's called Polymath. And what he's done is taken famous polymaths throughout history. This is kind of speaking to the questioner's query. But I'm not sure he's going in a good place, because I skated ahead. In the last polymath, he mentions is Susan Sontag. I mean, if he's considering this, this wacky New York broad to be a very knowledgeable, very eloquent, good writer, blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot more to it than that. So who is the person in the world today that covers all the bases? Knowledge in a broad number of fields, and not just superficial, but a little bit of depth. I mean, this is the problem with being a polymath. You're kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of none. So who's the Aristotle of our age? I don't know.
That's a really tough one. Aristotle seems even harder to come up with a contemporary or an example of today than even Socrates would. I mean, because Socrates' great questions was wise, but Aristotle was.
Yeah, Aristotle covered a lot more bases than Socrates did, and his legacy was much more positive than that of Socrates.
Well, if anyone has any suggestions for who might be the modern equivalent of any of these people, I'd love to hear it. So put it in the comments for us.
Yeah, I'd love to hear some comments.
Let's see, what does Doug or Matt think about the southern part of Chile? Also, where's the best place to buy farmland in Uruguay?
Been to southern Chile, including to the island of Chiloé, which is offshore. Nobody goes there. It can be beautiful. It can be windswept. Far south, glaciers. Oh, it's very nice. One of the problems with southern Chile is that they have a racial problem. It's Indian country. The Mapuche Indians were actually never really conquered by the conquistadores. And, they become quite nationalistic. So you get this really beautiful place, beautiful seashore, beautiful mountains. It's like California. But, you've got this racial problem, which is always simmering, southern Chile. So, yeah, it's great. And, Chile as a country is kind of has its ups and downs. I mean, it's been up since Pinochet became the most advanced country in Latin America due to, this dictator that everybody hates. But now it seems to be going back the other way. So I don't know. And Uruguay, farmland here in Uruguay. If you really want to go into farmland country in the interior, in the Pampas, you're going to be in the middle of nowhere. It's like living in the middle of Texas. I mean, I'd say forget about it. That's why I live on a farm, and I've got like 150 acres of soybeans here, and I got cattle and all this stuff. But I'm a half an hour from Punta del Este,
right? So
it's a different story.
Yeah, trade-off. I'm not sure I'd want to make to be deep in the Pampas.
No, not really. Of course, if we go into a post-apocalyptic scenario, it might turn out to be a good choice, or maybe things will turn out like I think it was oh God, who's the science fiction writer that died a few years ago that used to write weird, surreal science fiction books? I'm trying to think of one of them, like his last book. I think was it called Patagonia? It was about the last people on Earth were a couple of ignorant Peruvian natives that later devolved into they bred and things changed and mankind continued as a dolphin-like sea creature.
Really?
Who am
I've never heard that.
one of his books right now, Slaughterhouse-Five. Who wrote that?
Oh, Kurt Vonnegut?
Yeah, exactly. So, well, the best predictor of the future is not think tanks. It's science fiction, quite frankly. Maybe Vonnegut's right.
Yeah, that would be a weird one. Let's see. Has Doug ever taken one of those DNA tests like at Ancestry or 23andMe? And if so, or whether or not, what's your opinion on the possible risks of control or tracking that information, that information somehow gets into the databases?
I've never taken it because, frankly, I don't really care, number one. Number two, it may not be that accurate. Number three, there has been evidence that political correctness has even seeped into this, where they've tried to, show that everybody's already a melange of different ethnic groups, which eventually is going to be more or less true anyway. But the answer is no. I don't know, and I don't really care.
Well, like you've said, you see your genes as your enemy. They're just trying to use you like a parasite, using your body for their own survival. So why would you give a shit about more information about them, I guess?
Yeah, exactly. And it's information that, once it goes out into the ether, if somebody really doesn't like me, they might find some way to use it against me.
True. Okay, let's see. We're kind of running out of time, so I just want to get a few more questions in before we go. Sorry. Do you see institutional investors moving their gold reserves into crypto in the near future?
Good question. Yeah, what's gonna triumph? Is it going to be Bitcoin, which is really the only crypto that seems to make sense to me from my, limited knowledge of it, or is it gold? And at $60,000, it's not the same thing that it was at 6,000 or 600 as an investment, as a speculation. Yeah, I think more people are going to go to it though. But then, if the government illegalizes it as a competitor to its own cryptocurrency, that'll come to a dead halt, and all the institutions will sell. Good question.
All they have to do is they could just when they come out with their own central bank digital currency, they could have a one-time, or a limited window where you can convert your Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency legally and at market value for the same value in central bank digital currency, much like what FDR did with gold when they made private ownership illegal. Like you could convert it into dollars and they would buy it back from you and it's fine. But then after that, they devalued it. That happening really easy with Bitcoin.
Right. One thing that never ceases to amaze me is how all of us humans are really like a herd of wildebeest, and the state and the people that get into the state are like lions that are hunting us, that herd us and tell us what we must do and where we must go. And it's horrible. I mean, that's basically what this all boils down to, that question. It's a political question. It's horrible.
So Doug, what's your take on mass incarceration and the related, I'm not sure if I can pronounce this right, decarceral movement, which is funded by left-wing groups like Real Justice PAC, which is aimed to elect district attorneys across the country who will not prosecute basic crimes?
Well, look, I'm a great believer in justice, and justice is people getting what they deserve. But the problem is our whole judicial system, quite frankly. I mean, the idea is not to punish people for violating a law, of which there are thousands and thousands, and most of them are stupid and counterproductive. The idea is to make the victim whole. So if all these thugs, and most of the people in jail do belong in jail, most of them are criminals, frankly, uh, they're sitting in jail serves no useful purpose. So I can understand why this movement wants to release them from jail, because they're just a cost sitting in jail, picking up even more bad habits. Okay, I can understand that argument, which is one of the arguments that they make, but it's not solving the basic problem. Right to the root of the problem is, hey, you steal something from somebody, you got to pay it back, plus your costs of a trial and everything. So that would solve the problem. The market would solve the problem. The government can't solve the problem. So the whole system has to be overturned, not punishing the miscreant, but making the victim whole should be the main emphasis. And I think that would solve the problem for both these crazy leftists that want to let all these criminals out for some good reasons, but mostly stupid reasons, and people that want to maintain some kind of order in society. So I guess that's my answer.
No, well, a lot of the problem is that there's a whole body of law that is not, that creates, there's lots of victimless crimes, right? Procedural, administrative type of crimes that, if in that basis of trying to find justice, just don't exist. I mean, there's no
victim.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's just some arbitrary rule that the kind of people that get into Congress decided to make up. Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know if you saw this report that came out not long ago about the cost of New York City jails, the cost to incarcerate someone for a year. Did you see this?
100 grand, I'll guess, 100 grand.
Boy, not even close. $447,000.
Jesus, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
Really is. You could probably make their victims whole with that, to be honest.
Yeah, in most cases you could.
Yeah.
Not only make them whole, make them rich.
Exactly. I mean, it's truly unbelievable. I mean, the numbers, we are just so ineffective at actually getting anything done. And the answer is we need more money for it. And then you end up in these, situations like this where more money does not help.
All China has to do is not make any really egregious mistakes. China just has to be cool, because the West is totally destroying itself.
I agree. Okay. Just two more questions here, Doug. Are libertarian ideas a hard sell, or are libertarians just bad salespeople?
No, libertarians make an intellectual sale, and logic is not what wins the day here. It's feelings and emotion. And libertarians don't, they think that just because it's logical, people are much more interested in what's right as opposed to what's logical. So libertarians don't talk enough about the morality of what they believe in. Libertarians are, in the Myers-Briggs test, they're INTJs, which are a very small proportion of the possible personality types. It's pretty hopeless.
So bad, but the answer would be bad salespeople ultimately, because it's not the ideas that are the problem.
Oh, that's right. I'd like to think that anyway. But then again, as we talked about earlier, everybody for the first, 15, 20 years of their life grows up in a communist society called the family. So of course they think that the state ought to be their family now that they've left their family. It's kind of like a continuation. Seems kind of logical.
That's true, but there's also the drive as a teenager for emancipation from your family, for that individual freedom to be separate from, which seems almost, ingrained in your DNA. That you want to separate from your parents, like you want to be emancipated from them.
It does, and teenagers are notorious for reading Ayn Rand's books, but then when they go off to college, they're told that it's all rubbish and gonna wash those memes from your mind. So
Okay. Let's see. Let me just find one more question here that wrap this up pretty well. Let's see. Well, this one I could actually answer, but the question is, when did Doug acquire the domain name internationalman.com? And did he pay much for it? Does Doug think it's worth investing in good.com domain names? Do you remember?
yeah, that's the question that you know a lot about, and I don't know much about at all.
Do you know how you got internationalman.com?
Well, I remember how after I'd written the book, I was looking for a good title for the book. And this was way before the internet, of course. And there was a rock song that had that said International Man, obscure rock song. I don't know what it was, but I said, that's a good name. I'm going to take that. So that's how the name originated. It's lost in the mists of history, but it had to do with the song, with that phrase. But I don't know, Matt, what's it worth?
Well, actually, so I guess you were really a part of these conversations, but I bought internationalman.com, and I paid $55,000 for it, and I sold it, or the cost of it, to your business partner, David Gallant. So,
oh, is that right? God, it was worth that much money then.
Yeah, I don't think David believed me at first. I think he thought I was trying to make money on the deal or something. I'm like, no, here's what I paid for it. But I bought a domain name. So yeah, that's one. I guess
I don't know how but I guess I own it now because we have.
You have internationalman.com, yeah.
So I don't pay very much attention to these things, which is kind of foolish, I admit. Wow, interesting.
I mean, domain names they have historically been, especially before pre-Google's dominance, were like real estate is a way to think of them. Because when you were trying to think of, if you wanted to buy a commodity, or if you were looking for to find a particular brand, we were trained early on to type in, if you want to buy flowers, you go to flowers.com. I mean, that's just what you do, because Google and the search engines didn't really exist or weren't as effective. So it was a good real estate is one way that I looked at it for a while. And that's why I got involved in domain names. But as Google has come into dominance, it's become less important. Although I will say that when we had Marco Witzer on, he talked about the sort of new decentralized domain naming system, which is kind of interesting, where he's buying a lot of domain names, which I encourage people to watch that video with Marco. But actually, I wanted to ask you that question because I wasn't sure if you even remembered where that came from.
No, I don't remember the financial background surrounding it either, as I've demonstrated. But is .com still important? I mean, shouldn't there be a .everything?
There really are there really are many different types of domains that are available now. So I think they've just lost the power that they had at one point, because the search engines have made them sort of unnecessary. But I think that who knows, the way technology changes, they could become important again.
I remember at one point, correct me if I'm wrong, but the micronation in the South Pacific called Tuvalu, it was assigned .tv, and for a while it was selling its domain name on that basis.
They still are. Yep, they still are. Yep.
Are they? Oh.
Yeah. So there must be. I believe there are thousands of them now. Every country has at least one, but then there are all kinds of different commercial ones that they came up. There's like .doctor, .media, .whatever. So there's so many of them now. Honestly, it's hard to keep track of. I certainly haven't done a good job. But one more question for you, Doug. Are you familiar with the forecaster Gerald Celente, and what do you think of his track record in forecasts?
Well, I don't know. I know Gerald, and I like Gerald, and Gerald's going to be on the show with us, I think, sometime in the weeks or months to come, very definitely. But I think Gerald and us are on the same page, certainly. But I don't follow his stuff closely, so you can't follow everybody. It's just not possible.
Oh,
you got to have a life. So
You do. He is smart. He is smart in his. I think it's his trend forecasting journal is what his main product is.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
a lot of good insights in there, and I mean, it's hard to argue with his view on life and liberty and the economic disasters that we're setting ourselves up for. I mean,
yeah. It'll be great when we have them on.
Great. Okay. Well, I didn't get to all the questions today, Doug, but I know we've gone a little long, so I'll just leave it at that and appreciate your time today.
Okay, thank you, Matt.